this evening. And once again, for those of you just now logging on, if you've not connected with us before, I'm Pastor Howard Bass of City Church in Tampa, Florida, and you are watching iChurch. This is our midweek online gathering where we just break open the Word of God for about 30 minutes or so and share some wisdom that I believe hope to be a help and a supplement to you on your journey of faith. So we have been in a series in the last couple of weeks. We've taught about Joseph, and we've been dealing with the overall biblical concept of process. That theme, process, is the practical application of the journey of how God takes us from destiny, awakening, dreams, purposes, those things that come into our heart when we have strategic moments in the presence of God where He opens up something and births a pursuit in us. And so we've been talking about process, and we've been looking at Joseph on Sunday. And then again tonight, we really want to look at David. And 1 Samuel 30 is really kind of where we're going to be camping out tonight and taking our concept, our material from. And so without reading, I'm going to paraphrase. You can find this in 1 Samuel 30. We taught on it Sunday. For those of you that were already, that were with us rather Sunday morning in service, then you know that we read that passage. But in 1 Samuel 30, David and his men are, they've come home to their place, their city called Ziklag, and they found it burned with fire. A company of people called the Amalekites had attacked their city, had invaded them. And the Bible said that they took all of their possessions, their family. They didn't kill anybody, but they took them captive. I want to begin tonight by throwing out the concept of being empowered to recapture your future and build our time together this evening around that. And so the book says that when David and his men came back, and we talked about this Sunday, but if you read chapter 29, it's very important when you get an opportunity to read 1 Samuel 29, because what you see there is the backstory, the context. David and his men had tried to go with Achish, who was the king of the Philistines and the Philistine army, to fight against Saul and Israel in a place called Aphek, which is in Central Ebor, or I'm sorry, Central Ebor, yeah. And that you can tell where I took my son over the weekend to spend some time hanging out with him at game time. And so we were at Central Ebor, but it's in Central Israel. And there is Central Ebor in Tampa. Central Israel is not anywhere near where we were. But nevertheless, they had a 3-day journey. When they get back to Ziklag, they had been 3 days. They'd covered 50 miles. So they're physically exhausted. And we dealt with it Sunday, but they're processing rejection. And so I want you to think about what it's like when you've been in a long process, because that's really what the context, what I'm talking about tonight is a metaphor. David's situation in 1 Samuel 29 and 30 is a metaphor for those seasons when we have been in a long process. We've been on a journey of disappointment. We've been on a journey of closed doors. We've been on a journey of closed relationships. And feeling like we've been rejected. And so we have to process that. And so he and his men are carrying that emotional baggage, and they're also moving for 50 miles. Think about it. On foot, they covered 50 miles in 3 days. So they're emotionally and physically exhausted, and they come to Ziklag, and everything that mattered to them is gone. Their homes are burned. Their city is burned to the ground. The only thing that remains is the ashes of what used to be. And so I want to ask you, as we kick this thing and ramp it up tonight, how do you handle when you're in a season, when you're having to process, dealing with, and trying to rebirth something in the ashes of what used to be? Something melted down on you. I want to use that terminology. When David and his men came to Ziklag, discouraged, confused, exhausted, rejected, closed doors on a long journey, and they get there, they discover something unexpectedly melted down, and the only thing that is left is the ashes of their city. Their wives are gone, their children are gone, Their material goods are gone. Their money's gone. I mean, it's comprehensive meltdown. Man, it is comprehensive. And the Sunday, what we dealt with, and I'm not going to get into it this evening in detail, but if you want a frame of reference, go to Exodus 17. The Amalekites, when they attack, the spirit of Amalek, it is a type of weariness. It brings an ungodly weariness. We get emptied by the process. We get emptied by the journey. So David and his men are there, and the Bible says in verse 6, they wept until they had no more power to weep. They're empty. So I want to talk to us tonight and shape this time because God has weary warriors. He has empty sons and daughters who are processing soul weariness and in a season of emptiness because of the longer and larger journey you've been on and the longer, larger process you've been in. That's really when we're going to camp out tonight, because God has you on his mind. And for the last week or so, the Spirit of God has just been turning in my heart about this and to just talk to us about not only his plan. I mean, it's great to know God has a plan. And when we're processing meltdowns and closed doors and disappointment and rejection and frustration, and we're exhausted because of the journey we've been in, really, it's good to know God has a plan. And that's great. So the plan is about recapturing the future. Yes, God has a plan in my meltdown. God has a plan in your meltdown. But where we do life, where life gets real, and this is where the prophetic and faith and the word of God and the presence of God, being present, moment aware, and aware of his presentness in our moments becomes real. We get to a place like David and his men where we become emptied by the process and the journey. And no doubt I'm talking to people right now who have already been in a larger season or larger context of disappointment. Disappointment wears down our soul. But as long as some things are okay, we can balance our disappointment with our desires and drives to keep moving. But the metaphor of what David and his men weeping themselves empty in 1 Samuel 30 represents is tapping into a place of soul weariness and personal emptiness that it is almost impossible to bounce back from. So I want to shift real quick through this story, because David, the Bible said that there's total chaos. I mean, there's a meltdown, there's a breakdown of order, there's a breakdown of honor, there's a breakdown of the integrity of their societal structure and how their culture was, the culture of the 600 men and their relationship with David. They talked about killing him, but they're all empty. And in David's emptiness, he begins to experience divine recovery, and that's great. But the Bible said as David recovered and he encouraged himself in the Lord to find strength he did not know he had. He tapped into a place of strength that momentarily seemed like it no longer existed. And that's key, because it's important that when we are in seasons of emptiness, we must understand that God has already appointed, indeed hid. He has hidden a bounce back or a comeback. So I want to use the verbiage setback and comeback, meltdown and turnaround. So we're talking about setback and comeback, meltdown and turnaround. So God's got a plan. In the meltdown, God's got a plan to turn it around. In our setback, God's birthed a comeback. Now that may sound cliche, but it's kingdom. It's truth. There is bounce back and significance and strength that we can recover, because recovery is imperative if we're going to recapture our future. But between now and the moment that we gain the victory of what we're going after or pursuing, when we recapture that future that once was alive in us, but now because of our journey and our process has left us empty, what do we do in the empty place? This is critical, and this is what I want to talk to tonight. What do we do in the empty place? And I want to share some things with you that are very important and very key, because God has been turning over in my heart that there is a dimension of weariness and emptiness that many of his people are experiencing right now in direct relation to the longevity of the process you've been in, the intensity of it and the longevity of it. So David gets a recovery, and he goes to God. And the verbiage in 1 Samuel 30 is, but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God, and he bounced back. But what you see as you read through that passage is that when he and the 600 men begin to move forward, they come to a small brook called Besor. And the word Besor means good news, cheerful. It's literally the Hebrew word for cheerful or cheer up. And it comes from a root word meaning good news. So it literally means it's the place where you recover your joy because of good news. The information flow into your life begins to shift. You get a different quality of information that empowers you to shift your mood and your attitude and your emotions and your perceptions. It's very, very important. It's a type of God bringing different information, different than the rejection. It's a place of opposites. The brook Besor is a place of contradictions and opposites to the meltdowns that we've been going through. And so the problem for 200 of his men is that the book said in 1 Samuel 30 that as they're moving forward, they did not experience the level of recovery personally in terms of their stamina, their energy level, or their physical and emotional ability to cross that physical body of water and to pursue. And this is really where we're focusing on tonight. Because what do we do? How do we handle it? What is the process? In real time, what are the dynamics and what is our responsibility? How do we handle it when we are so empty by the process we've been in? And we are wearied because of our journey and the otherworldly things, the multitude of enemies and oppositions that you go through one thing and you power through it. You have a setback, but you come back. You have a setback, but you come back. But what happens when the perfect storm hits and now you're empty and you try to tap into a place or a well in your life, a well of motivation, a well of drive, a well of passion, a well of vision, or a well of stamina and skill set that you used to be able to draw from to empower yourself to power through the opposition or the disappointments or setbacks. But 200 of his men are at a place where they are tapped out. They're empty. They're weary and they're empty. And they cannot cross the brook. And so David models for them how the Father feels about us when we are empty because of weariness. We are empty because of weariness. And so I want to share some things with you tonight, straight from the Word, and I believe from the heart of the Holy Spirit himself, that are going to become equipping truths to kind of let you off the hook. And I'm not going to read through the passage tonight. I'm going to paraphrase through it to work through the material because it's just very critical. And I want to challenge you to, at your pace, on a leisurely devotional and meditative level, take a look at 1 Samuel 30. So here they are. They're in the place where good news is going to revive them. But right now, so I'm going to say that to you like as a prophetic forecast. God is going to visit you in your empty place, that place you can't reboot yourself beyond, the place where you're feeling frustrated and struggling because you just don't feel like you have what it takes to reinvigorate your capacity to move forward. So weariness, when we're processing weariness, there is a sense of hopelessness or helplessness that can kind of accompany it. And so I want to share some things with you tonight that are very important. The first thing you need to know, I mean, he's got 200 men who are warriors, and think this through with me for a minute. Their vocation is they make war. They excel at battle. They are battlefield warriors. They have battlefield prowess. They're not weak men, they're mighty men. In fact, earlier in the book of Samuel, 1 Samuel, the scriptures call them mighty men. These men are David's mighty men. They're men of exploits. Like you, they are people of purpose. They are people of prowess. They are people that have significant victories under their belts. And I want to say something to you tonight, who in your past you have significant victories and accomplishments under your belt. But right now you're in a season where you're empty. And part of the challenge of being weary in the empty place is that you don't have the ability to rebirth new victories or to birth new victories. And so the enemy can sometimes get in the mix of our thought life and our feelings and try to gum up the works emotionally for us by throwing a sense of failure or a sense of inadequacy upon us. And so I want to share some things. Is these 200 men are not weak, they're warriors, but they're wounded. So I want to speak life and hope tonight to wounded warriors, weary warriors, empty warriors. Because what's important for us to be able to see when we can't see, or to know by faith that when we can't feel anything, we don't feel powerful, we don't feel like conquerors, we don't feel victorious, we just feel empty, because we are. And you need to know that every champion, every warrior, everyone that God has his hand on, everyone who the Father feels deeply about, goes through seasons where, just based on the longevity of the process, we come to a place of a season of weariness, and where we're processing emptiness. These are not weak men, they're warriors. They're mighty men. But at this particular time, they don't have the stamina. They don't have the strength. They can't move forward. And when we hit that place, the enemy will try to work through our sense of strengthlessness to make us feel stuck. So the first thing I want to tell you tonight is that it's important to know from God's perspective that weariness is not weakness. For those tonight, or you're watching this, whatever your particular personal context and season that you're in, you need to understand that if you're processing weariness and emptiness, it is not the result of your weakness. It is not reflective that you are weak and incapacitated on a permanent level. It simply is an indication of the longevity and the intensity of the process you've been in. I'm going to say that again because it's very key. Weariness isn't weakness. It is merely reflective of the intensity and the longevity of the process you've been in, and God knows it. Why? Because he orchestrated and ordained your process. See, a key to understanding and recognizing this is to remember that David and his men in 1 Samuel 30, within 3 days of this event, the 13-year season that David's been in waiting to become king, and all those years of being persecuted by Saul, for 8 years, he's been directly persecuted by King Saul. And for 4 of those years, he's been living with these men in Ziklag, hiding out with a bounty on his head, escaping death, escaping the attempts of Saul to kill him. So these men are already, they've been in a process of pressure. And God is about to relieve the pressure once and for all and change the era in their life. They can't see it, however, because of the level of emptiness. Let me suggest to you that perhaps the dimension of weariness and emptiness you're facing right now is not because of your weakness, but it's because God's about to shift the intensity and the longevity of the process you've been in and close the door to that era once and for all. What if the battle you're enduring right now in the empty place and the weariness of soul that you're enduring is the result of the fact that something dynamic is about to happen for you, and something is about to shift in your favor that frankly you can't make happen based on your skill set, based on the overall process you've been in. Again, your emptiness isn't weakness. It's a reflection of the intensity and the longevity of the process you've been in. God was about to close the door forever to that era of process. David and his men are about to go from process to promotion. So what if your weariness is the result? What if it is the sign you need for God to give you to say, hold on, because in a very short space of time, I'm going to move you. I'm going to transition you out of the transitions. You're going to emerge out of the shadows of your transition, and I'm going to shift you from process to promotion and bring about some significant resolution in your life. So examine the weariness and refuse to embrace it as weakness, and internalize and receive it as the fact that, this is just evidence that I've been in a process. It's been intense and it's been long. This has been no ordinary season. Naturally, in the earth, the season is 3 months long. In the kingdom, most seasons are a lot longer than that. And a season of process will be even longer. So the depth of your weariness isn't about weakness. It's about the intensity and longevity of the process you've been in. The second thing you need to know is that the Father's faithfulness transcends your weariness. And he's got a plan to protect you. In fact, you are in the middle of your weariness and your emptiness. You're the beneficiary of prophetic preservation. Let me qualify what that means. David's 200 men are too exhausted. So David's to cross the brook. So let me ask you this. If they're too exhausted, they're too physically, mentally, and spiritually empty to be able to cross a small stream of water, how vulnerable must they be to any invading force or army that would have attacked them in that condition at that time? In other words, they're vulnerable, but yet in their vulnerability, they are protected and shielded prophetically. What I mean by that is the word of the Lord that had gone years before over David's life. See, the word that processes us is also the word that preserves us. If I was doing a prophetic teaching tonight, just talking about laws of prophetic destiny and laws of prophetic words and utterances and how God fulfills the prophetic, one of the things that's important to understand, and you see this really in Isaiah 55, when God talks about, he gives his word an assignment. My word will not return to me void, but it'll accomplish that which I please, and it'll prosper in the thing to which I send it. The idea there is that there is prophetic preservation. So the word of the Lord, or the promise, or the dream, or the drive, or the destiny, or the purpose that processes you, also while you're in process, being pressured, and even to the point where we come under attack like they did at Ziklag, there is a preservation. You're the beneficiary of prophetic preservation. They couldn't kill. The Amalekites didn't kill a single one of them. They took them captive, but they didn't harm a hair on their head. And they hurt them in the near term financially, but David and his men actually gained a financial reward above and beyond what it looked like they lost. I'm telling you tonight, in your place of emptiness, in your place of weariness, there is a prophetic preservation that the Spirit of God has orchestrated to shield you even in your empty place. So it is no small detail that David's 200 exhausted men who remained by that brook, just guarding and protecting the stuff, did not come under an attack. They were left to work through their emptiness. That is prophetic preservation, because David takes 400 other men and move forward and do battle. So I want to put it this way. God's got you. The word of the Lord that's been pressuring you, processing you, in the longer term context of your life, that word that is pressured and processed you is also preserving you, and you will not be destroyed in your empty place. God is not going to allow your enemy to attack you here in your weary place. The weariness may be the result of an attack, but God's not going to let the enemy further that weariness. And while you're having to work through that, while you're having to be in a place of processing your emptiness, dealing with your weariness, God's got you. I came to tell you, somebody tonight really felt this strongly today as I was preparing for our time together, really felt strongly to encourage somebody, to tell you prophetically, as a prophetic directive, God said to tell you, he's got you. I don't know who you are and what it is that is shaking your tree. I don't know the trembling. I don't know the shaking. I don't know the emptiness. I don't know your context, but I do know that God spoke to my heart deeply and intensely today. I said, tell them I've got them. Tell them God's got them. God's got this. Your responsibility in your empty place. You don't have to fear any more loss. You don't have to fear any enemy attack. God's got your back. God's got your vulnerability prophetically shielded right now. God's got your back. So why that matters is because if he doesn't defend you based on the emptiness and the weariness of the journey you've been in, you don't have the capacity to defend yourself. So there is an angel army that I am convinced in my spirit that shielded those 200 men, that was allocated by God to perform a protective barrier. There is prophetic preservation over your life and over the word of the Lord in your life that's going to break you out of the empty, weary place. But what matters when you're there is don't try to be something you're not and fight a battle you're not equipped to handle. Very important. Don't try, in fact, to fight battles that you're not equipped to handle. In fact, this is a key strategy and a practical application when you're empty and wearied by process. One of the things you need to do, it's very important, retain your power to say no and refuse to engage the pressure to involve and embrace those things you're not equipped right now to do. If you don't have the emotional stamina for it, and it's not a life obligation, if you've got an option, don't get involved in it. You need to process your emptiness. You need to feel it. And I want to share something with you very important. Because of the Father's faithfulness, you are covered in your weariness. And he transcends your weariness, and he is not going to allow you to remain in it. What is besor? It is the Hebrew word what? Cheerful. Your soul is going to come out of the empty place. The joy is going to be returned, and God's going to reboot you. God's going to revive you in your mood, in your emotions. But the thing about the brook besor, because it means cheer or joy that is recovered based on good news, it doesn't just mean that God reboots your soul from being empty and weary because he visits you spiritually. It's not about hearing a word now in terms of revelation that encourages you. It's about a change of a different kind of information. No's are going to begin to become yes. Loss is going to begin to look and sound and feel and experience like recovery. Because the good news, you're going to get a different flow of information. The quality of the information that you've been dealing with, that's been wearying you and emptying you, is going to change. And David comes back having recovered everything, having recaptured everything, brought back their families, brought back their finances, brought back all of their material possessions. And I mean, this is crazy because the Amalekites had attacked the Philistines in several other areas. So there's literally an economic reward that is assigned to it. So this all in its totality speaks to us about the fact that there are some things that let's just be real right now. There are some areas where we've been so emptied by the process we've been in. The only thing that can really empower us beyond that is the information that comes from a change in our circumstances. I'm going to say that one more time and let that sink in. If you've been in a process of negative and contradictory circumstances, these 200 men being emptied and wearied there, they got rebooted, not because they tapped into a strength in them, not because the Spirit of God visited them and breathed on them. No. What changed their mood and their season, what empowered them out of their empty place, what made them well in the place of their weariness, was the good news that came with a change of situation. And I'm telling you tonight, in the authority of Jesus' name, God's going to affect that so that the information you've been getting and the doors that are accompanied and facilitating the flow of information is going to begin to change. And this speaks to God rebuilding us by transforming our circumstances, by stepping into them, by personally getting involved and saying, I know what you can't handle. I know you're weary. I know you're empty, and I'm going to empower you in your empty place through a change of situations. I'm going to bring victory where there was defeat, and I'm going to affect the battle on your behalf. It's not your job to make war right now. Your job is to feel the emptiness, to feel the weariness, be real about it, and let it pass through you. So as we kind of get ready to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes or so, I want to share a couple of practical things because it's very important. We fight all the time. Fight the good fight of faith. Lay hold of eternal life. There is a good fight of faith that we as believers and followers of Jesus are engaged in. The journey of faith is the fight of faith. And there are seasons when the warfare is more intense than others. So this is a metaphor for what do we do when we're so weary we don't have the capacity to war? How do we handle that? Don't fight what you need to feel. This is very important. I want to share this with you right now. Do not fight what you need to feel. What do I mean by that? Don't try to be something you are not right now. David's 200 men had to be honest. They had to be real with their king and say to him, we love you, we're with you, but we can't take a step. I literally cannot do anything other right now than sit down. I'm sorry. I'll be faithful where I am. I'll do what I can in my weariness, but I'm not going to try to do something I don't have the strength for. So you got to be real. You got to feel it. You can't deny it. The denial is never the path to deliverance. You can't deny reality and break through into victory. You cannot deny reality and break through into victory. So you've got to feel it. Don't fight it. You know, if you're strengthless and you're empty and you're weary, feel it. And because here's why. When you fight it, you delay your deliverance. When you feel it, you process it. And when you process it, you let it pass through you. Don't try to wrestle with it. Don't try to defeat it. Don't try to fight it. Let it pass through you. And why that matters is because the sooner it passes through you, the sooner you pass through the emptiness you're in. You got to be real about it. Because what's your assignment when you're empty? To roll the burden of the recovery over on the one who is capable, the one who is empowered. See, David is a warrior king, is empowered. He's a type of Jesus. In this scenario, he's a type of Jesus, our King. He's the type of the Holy Spirit, our advocate. And he's a type of the Father who's on the throne. And this matters because these 200 men roll their future. They roll their ability to recapture their future over on their king. And they say, you know what? We can't, but he can. So we're going to do what we can do. And we're going to roll the burden of my battlefield victory over onto him. So the sooner that you stop fighting it, the sooner you can roll it onto him. You feel it, don't fight it, and you let it pass through you. And then the burden of the breakthrough passes over onto the shoulders of the one who carries the crown to be the king of your battlefield. If you can't, there's sometimes when we cannot reboot ourselves quickly or easily, and we need not be ashamed about that. You got to just feel it. Don't fight that. Feel it. Because when you feel it, it passes through you. And when it passes through you, you pass through the place and you come out on the other side, re-empowered, reignited, and your weariness is not a place you're going to get stuck in. It's just a place you're passing through. But you know, the truth is sometimes we fight things we just need to feel and let get through us. Refuse to fight every battle, because every battle is not your battle. And if you are fighting what you need to be feeling, you're delaying deliverance. So these 200 men have David's permission, and here's what matters. They had David's permission. They had David's protection. They had David's preservation. He affirmed as their king. Again, this is a type of Jesus, the Father and the Holy Spirit, affirming our right to work through our weariness and not be something we're not when we're empty. And it's okay. And I said this Sunday morning for those that were part of our local congregation. You heard me say this Sunday, but I want to say it again tonight because it's very important. It's okay. It's okay to not be okay. And when you're not okay, don't try to be something you're not. It's okay at times to not be okay. And these 200 men were real and they were vulnerable before David. And so David preserved them, protected them, and he covered them. So as the story goes that David and his 400 men destroyed the Amalekites and brought back everything. They brought back all of those men. So there's preservation, there's protection, and there's affirmation and validation of their right to need recovery and to be covered and protected by David, which again is a type of God through the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, affirming and validating our right to work through and feel our emptiness and to not be okay. And so God's saying, I've got this. Let me handle your battle. Let me deal with your emptiness. I've got a plan. Right now, I don't need you to be Superman, Superwoman. I don't need you to be super saint. I don't need you to be super spiritual. I need you to rest. I need you to focus on just doing what you need to do in terms of your downtime. And in the process, trust me to bring about the change and the breakthroughs that you need, that you're not empowered to birth anyway. Don't take on, and I'm talking to somebody tonight who your propensity is to take on far too many responsibilities because the enemy has allowed you to get into a school of thought that the more responsible you are, the busier you are, the more impressed and pleased God will be, and that's what's going to break you through. And the result is, however, if you're really be honest with yourself about it, that's what's wearing you out. And so the Lord's saying, I've got this. You need to back off. Take your hands out of all of those different things and just chill, relax, rest, invest in rest, and recognize your need to right now focus on where you are, to feel it and let it pass through you. And then I've got you covered. I've got you protected, and I'm going to handle those issues in the battlefield. I've already scheduled your recovery, and you're going to recapture your future, but it's not because of your skill set or your stamina. It's because of my ability to cover you in your emptiness and in your weariness. And one of the things that's going to happen is you are going to, in that process, regain your confidence. So tonight, and this is very important, because when you go through protracted weariness and you find your place at gut level emptiness, and you have to be real and say, I've tried to reboot myself out of this. I've tried to come back from this, and I just can't seem to come back from this like I came back from other stuff. I just can't seem to get out of this. What's wrong with me? You need to reject the what's wrong with me mindset. The question, quote, what's wrong with me? That is demonic. It is not prophetic. It's demonic in the sense that the enemy will try to use that to wear you out, because the Bible said that there were 200 or there were a number of worthless men. I read from the New American Standard, calls them worthless men. The King James calls them men or sons of Belial. But in the Hebrew original language, it means they were worthless. They were negative, condemning, accusatory, critical, that were with David, that had gone to the battle, and they come back. And when David gets ready to bless these 200 weary warriors with not only their family and their finances back, but also with the reward, the spoil, the profit margin, literally is the idea. They didn't just get back their stuff, they got rewarded. They got more than they thought they had lost when things melted down. And these worthless men accused them and said, they are not worthy. And so give me 5 minutes and I'm done, because this is a point of emphasis that's very important. When you're empty and weary, there will be a sense, if you're not careful, and part of the stuff you got to process in that time is the enemy trying to put or project upon you a sense of worthlessness. You are not worthy because you're weary. You're not worthy because you're not good enough. You're not strong enough. You're not worthy because you're weak. You're not worthy because if you were really all of that, you would already come out of this thing. You see what I'm talking about right now? The enemy will get in your business and say, you're not worthy to be blessed or rewarded beyond what you've been through, because you're not battling. See, the enemy will try to use a sense of worthlessness and unworthiness to pressure you into going out to fight things you're not capable of fighting right now. So you got to be wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. You got to be wise in that season and realize, you know what? The enemy in my weariness and in my emptiness is going to hit my mind and my emotions with a sense of worthlessness to try to provoke me onto battlefields I'm not called, qualified, or capable at this season to be engaged in. So what you have to do is reject the sense of worthlessness. So when these worthless men try to basically say to David, they are not worthy of a reward because they didn't go out to fight. They were too weary, too exhausted, too empty. David rebukes the worthless men and says, no, no, no. In my kingdom, the weary and the empty who stand in their place are as worthy of a reward and the breakthrough and the spoils of victory as those who've been engaged in the battle themselves. You see, God knows what you're capable of handling. And the level of reward that comes upon your life is based on the value and the worth that the Father sees in you, not based on any accusation or information that can come against you. That's why it all goes back to what I said at the beginning. Your weariness is not weakness. It's just a reflection of the intensity and the longevity of the process you've been in. And nobody knows that more than the Father. And so he values you as such and says that you are worthy of not just coming out of the place of emotional emptiness or weariness or heaviness or exhaustion you've been through, but you're also worthy of my best, even though you've been empty. So tonight, as we bring this home, I want to encourage your heart with the truth that what you've been fighting, maybe you need to stop fighting it. Maybe you just need to feel it and be real about it and roll the burden of breakthrough onto him. Now, here's the key. Letting it go and believing God's got this. Letting go is not a natural response. It's a learned behavior. Letting go is not a natural response. It's a learned behavior. What's your personal behavior pattern? When conflict or crisis arises, and even when you're empty, even when you're vulnerable, even when you're struggling or frustrated, is your propensity to try to fix it? Are you a fixer? Is your propensity to try to battle through? Is your propensity to try to make war? Do you step back and evaluate and assess and be real about everything? Or are you just prone as a natural response to conflict to engage the fight without thinking it through first and evaluating whether or not you've got what it takes to win at that time? Because letting go is not something we easily do. And for those of us that have been discipled, those of us that understand the word, those of us that have been on the journey of faith and have been followers of Jesus really for more than 5 or 10 minutes, then we understand the warfare element of the journey of faith. But not every season can be a season of warfare. Even those longer seasons of process have to be times of there have to be certain seasons of renewal, certain seasons of downtime. You can't fight all the time. You can't fight everything all the time. It will destroy you. And that's what the enemy wants. And so what matters is that you realize that letting go, and I'm talking right now to people, no doubt, that are struggling in the letting go. Okay, I hear you. You're sitting there and you're watching this and you're saying, okay, Pastor, I hear what you're saying and it sounds good. And I can even see that it's Bible. What you're telling me tonight is Bible. It's biblical. Man, I see it in the book. However, I'm struggling letting go. I'm struggling letting go of my sense of weakness. I'm struggling of letting go of my sense of failure. I'm struggling with letting go because what you're telling me is not an intuitive reaction for me. Letting go is not an intuitive reaction for us. We want to fix it. We don't let go. We try to hold on or grab tighter. We don't release things. We want to try to control and fix things. These 200 men were so empty, they had to let it go. They had to give the future up to David and the 400 men who could, trusting and believing that everything was going to be all right once it left their hands. But letting go is a learned behavior, not an intuitive reaction. It is a skill that is developed over time. It is not a natural response. So I want to say this to you. If you're struggling right now in your emptiness and your weariness, to let some things go and to back off and be real and feel and let the emptiness and the weariness you're processing pass through you. I want you to know there's grace from the Spirit of God Himself for where you are. You're going to have to practice letting go. So if you don't get it right the first time, keep going after it. Just let it go. That may even be a part of the process that's wearing you out, even on a deeper level, is letting it go. So how do you learn to let it go? You refuse to be obligated to do anything you're not anointed for. By anointed, I mean if you're not empowered right now, spiritually, emotionally, in terms of your drive, your passion, in your soul, if you're not empowered financially, if you don't have, see, God always gives you empowerment for the assignment at hand. These 200 men didn't get an empowerment and a re-energizing like the other 400 plus David did. Why is that? Because their assignment was not on the battlefield. So if you have to be honest and say, you know what, I got to let go of a sense of being overly responsible and overly engaged, and I've got to be wise enough and real enough to say, you know what, I'm not empowered for that. And if I'm not empowered for it, I don't have an assignment for it. And if it's not my assignment, I need to let it go, because if I try to hold on to what's not my assignment, I will fail. So maybe you need to let go of feeling like you got to fix and control and just hold on to the fact and the truth that you're empty and weary, and let God handle the details. And through that process, one of the things that happens is you begin to change your behavior pattern. So in future seasons and future scenarios, you will now have a skill set of saying, you know what, I used to struggle with letting go, but now, even though it's not necessarily intuitive or not necessarily natural, it's easier, and I can release things quicker because I've learned the lesson and developed the skill of discerning what I have no empowerment to be involved in, and then refusing to allow a sense of worthlessness to come upon my thought life or my identity to move me into arenas I am not called to be walking in. Now that takes some practice, but there is grace for you, because what the Father wants and what the Father is doing is He is protecting, preserving, and defending your right to work through the weariness and the emptiness you're in, while He handles the things practically that are going to re-energize, re-empower, and reauthorize you to move forward. You are in an empty place and you may feel weary, but I'm telling you right now, it's a place you are passing through. You are not going to stay here. The Father is going to handle the details that are going to change the flow of information in the situations that have been wearing you out. And the process you've been in is going to bring about a shift where you go from empty to empowered, not because you've got it all together, but because the Father's faithfulness transcends our emptiness. And you're going to experience that even in your own life. So my prayer for you tonight is that the Spirit of the Lord will give you a grace to reject any sense of worthlessness or inadequacy. I hope you're not fighting that. But the truth is, I believe that there comes certain seasons we all do battle with that on one level or another. And so that sense of worthlessness that the enemy would try to project upon you to move you into spheres of conflict that you don't have the power to be in right now, you don't have the capacity for. May God give you the grace, the wisdom, the discernment, and the discipline, the freedom, a boldness even, to retain and to implement your right to say no, and to not feel obligated to be involved in what you're not empowered to be involved in. So that's my prayer for us tonight as we close out this session. And I want to thank you so much for being on with us. It's been my privilege to be able to share this word with you. And I pray that it will not just help forecast hope, but bring a real tangible ability in terms of application to give you some tools to work with. And I'm telling you on a prophetic level that the Lord's going to move in those battlefields and marketplaces that you need him to move in. It's going to change the flow of information, and you're not going to stay stuck in your empty or weary place. Every process has an appointed conclusion, and when process is over, promotion comes up. And when promotion comes, circumstances change, and the information that wore you out now becomes truth that empowers you to be released from the empty place you've been in. So thanks for allowing me to share the word with you tonight. It's been so great to be able to invest this seed into your life, and thank you for your investment in this time together and for what you've committed to do for the Father, for Jesus, for his kingdom. Your level of investment in your faith, your discipleship, and being faithful to what God's called you to do is a powerful thing that the enemy fears. And he only fights what he fears. So the fact that you're weary and empty because of the fight you've been in is an indication the enemy fears something that has to do with the significance that you represent. So you're valued, you're loved, and you're treasured from the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And I thank you for your investment with us tonight. I know we got tonight, it seems like we have some new visitors all the time that are logging on. If you're not part of our local faith community, and the material that we're sharing is beneficial for you, and I pray that it is, I want to invite you to check out our website. We have a podcast where we have a ton of teaching material absolutely free. It's City Church Tampa, just like it sounds, citychurchtampa.org, citychurchtampa.org, and you can connect with us there. Also, if we're not connected on Facebook or Twitter, I'd love to be able to connect with you there as well. For our local church family, we love and bless you, and look forward to being together with you in God's presence on Sunday morning for worship. And for our larger online faith community, thanks again for being part of this ministry and what we are doing and what God's doing with us as an extended faith community here online. And I look forward to being with you next Wednesday night at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time for iChurch. Thanks again. May the Lord bless and keep you. He's got this, so you need to let it go.